The terrorists had escorted the 5 hostages to the beach, preparing to execute them directly, but they did not know that there were many snipers in ambush, ready to act, including sniper Brandon Beckett and his master, Chard Miller. At the same time, Colonel Jackson was also in the remote command room, taking control of the entire situation. Based on the images recorded by the drone, the colonel determined that the hostages were all Americans. Without hesitation, he immediately ordered to open fire. Miller fired the first important shot to Brandon, but just as Brandon locked on the target and was about to pull the trigger, he discovered that the terrorists had handed the child to a boy. At this moment, he was immediately confused. No matter what, he could not attack a child. Seeing the opportunity, the battle was delayed. Miller repeatedly urged his teammates to speak up one by one. The boy was holding a knife tightly. It seemed that the hostage would lose his head in a moment, but Brandon still couldn't pull the trigger in this helpless situation. Miller had to change the order to let someone else shoot. However, the boy suddenly threw away the knife, accidentally avoiding the fatal bullet. The gunshot terrified all the terrorists. One of them raised his knife and cut the hostage's throat. This time, the colonel couldn't sit still anymore and immediately ordered 2 armed helicopters to the battlefield. Brandon and the others also aimed at the terrorists who were scattered in all directions, continuously firing. Under the coordination of air and ground operations, the terrorists were instantly defeated and fled in panic. At the same time, the drone fired a missile to chase the target. The last 2 terrorists were blown to dust with a loud bang. However, despite winning this battle, Brandon's heart was still filled with guilt and pain. They could have done the job perfectly, but because of him, they almost made a huge mistake that led to the death of an innocent hostage. Such a mistake made even Miller unable to accept it. He came in front of Brandon and sternly warned him that he was a sniper at any time and could not hesitate. But Brandon could not have imagined that a greater danger had come to him after the operation ended. Brandon and his teammates went to Istanbul to relax. He suddenly noticed a blonde woman with a graceful body. That woman also turned her head just as their eyes met. Brandon only felt like his soul was about to be sucked out. But the other woman seemed to be deliberately teasing him without saying a word and walking away. How could Brandon hold back anymore? His body unconsciously followed her. The 2 of them, one in front and one behind, quickly arrived at the beach. However, just as Brandon was imagining what would happen next, his head was locked by an assassin lurking in the dark. The target was already visible. The assassin was about to squeeze his penis when a man suddenly shot him down. It was Brandon's former superior, named Peter Miller. After confirming that the killer was dead, Peter called Brandon to meet him near him. When the call ended, Brandon returned and found that he was alone. This made him even more curious about this mysterious woman. Not long after Peter met Brandon, he did not say many polite words, but went straight to the point, reminding Brandon, because the last time the terrorists offered 150,000 euros to kill him, he had to be especially careful recently. And Peter also knew about Brandon's mistakes on the battlefield, but he had warned him that as a sniper, he could not act on impulse. Otherwise, one day he would be killed by his own conscience. However, Peter came here not only to say these things. He also led Brandon's team onto the boat to meet the colonel. Now that the short vacation was over, waiting for them was the next mission. But this time the one giving the order was someone else. As soon as he finished speaking, a familiar voice rang out. Brandon turned his head and saw the beautiful blonde woman from before striding towards him. It turned out that she was Robin Slater, the commander of the Civil Military Cooperation Center. Robin did not say anything more, briefly and concisely introducing this mission. They had to go to Cruzia to coordinate with the local soldiers to escort them. Mr. Killen Energy went to inspect the oil pipeline, and he was also the target of the leader of the armed group who had been trained in the Air Force Special Forces. He was an extremely difficult opponent to deal with. So Robin would send a drone to conduct aerial reconnaissance to help the soldiers locate the enemy. After parting with Peter, Brandon's group immediately set off by helicopter to Russia. At this time, Killen's convoy had already set off. Everyone spread out on both sides of the road to observe every movement, even the wind blowing the grass. Robin also mobilized a drone to fly in the air. The defense system seemed to have no loopholes, but they did not expect that Gakub had led his subordinates to wait for a long time. And they had also prepared a powerful anti-material heavy sniper rifle. As soon as the car carrying Ankara appeared, only a whistling sound was heard. The terrible sniper bullet instantly penetrated the bulletproof glass and even passed through the bodyguard sitting on the bench. Before pinning Ankara the car accurately, after spinning it crashed into the ground. The surprise attack left everyone unable to react to run to find the terrorists' location. However, their location had been locked by Gakub before. As soon as he pulled the trigger, the remaining sniper died on the spot. At this point, the situation was completely chaotic. The Cruzia soldiers and the terrorists started fighting fiercely, but Brandon and his teammates still couldn't locate Gakub. Miller was so impatient that he kept walking back and forth like ants crawling on hot claws, but this also had no effect. Very quickly, Gakub once again found and shot down another sniper. Luckily, the drone had locked onto his location. The colonel immediately ordered the missile to be launched, only to hear a loud bang. The fire flared up fiercely in a flash, engulfing the 3 terrorists. Everyone was confused and hurriedly carried the dying and crew out. Brandon quickly ran to check on his teammates. Unfortunately, it was too late. When he returned to the barracks, Brandon was both sad and suspicious. He didn't understand why his teammates were so carefully camouflaged, but Gakub was still able to accurately determine their location. Moreover, after the battle ended, all the Cruzia soldiers were safe and sound. Only his team had 2 casualties. Brandon didn't believe that Gakub could see through the sniper's camouflage with just a glance. He also didn't believe that there would be such a coincidence of casualties. There was only one possibility that could lead to this situation. That is, there was an internal force in the Russian army. Hearing this blunt accusation, the GRUA officer's face immediately became unsightly. Immediately after, he had a heated argument with Brandon. Fortunately, Miller intervened in time to prevent things from getting worse. Came to punish Brandon for his recklessness and recklessness. The colonel sent Brandon to the Great Cape Mountains to guard the oil pipeline. Under the guidance of a fake observer, Brandon crossed the snow-covered peaks to reach the guard post. However, as soon as they met, the soldiers in the house looked at Brandon with hostility. They stood up and intended to teach this new soldier a lesson. But this time they hit the wrong person. Brandon blocked a strong punch, then counterattacked and knocked down one guy, then he dodged a knife and knocked down another guy, then stabbed the dagger into the pillar. This whole scene was seen by Zoff, who was hiding in the dark, waiting for Brandon to pull out his gun and take control of the situation. Then Zoff leisurely walked out. He already knew the reason Brandon was sent here and reminded Brandon that next time, if you haven't found evidence, then don't rush to accuse others, especially high-ranking officers. However, Zoff really admired Brandon's courage. He was sure that Brandon could definitely investigate the truth, so Zoff took the initiative to come up with a method. The best way to investigate is to go to the root of the problem. Why not directly ask the terrorists how they discovered the snipers? The sentence, although it sounds crazy, but it made Brandon think. Not long after Brandon's team, another patrol started, and they accidentally discovered a few snipers stealing things at the information station. Zoff didn't want to say more. He wanted to shoot directly, but Brandon stopped him. Brandon thought that although these people had stolen, their crime was not worthy of death. Listening to Brandon, Zoff did not argue, but let Brandon try to receive the order himself. Brandon took the weapon and went down the stairs very quickly, then controlled the 4 soldiers. However, just when Brandon thought that everything was over, the woman in front of him suddenly raised her gun. Luckily, Zoff was able to shoot her dead. The rest of the team rushed up in a flash and finished off 3 of them and captured the last soldier. This incident once again taught Brandon a lesson, helping him understand that not everyone deserves to be saved. That night, Miller contacted Brandon to give him the bad news that the person shot dead by the drone was not Gakub, but his brother-in-law. In addition, Miller also investigated all the information of Officer Kruzha in detail, but found no suspicious points. It seemed that Brandon's accusation was not true, but the danger was not over. The next day, a group of soldiers checked across the snowy mountains and headed straight to the guard post. It was obvious they were here to avenge their comrades. After everyone heard the news, everyone quickly started to prepare to respond. They broke the glass door to get a better view and overturned the tables and chairs to make a hiding place. Brandon and Sai then went out to ambush. Little by little, Sai was getting more and more worried. He didn't understand why Czech didn't launch an attack. However, Brandon knew clearly this was just the calm before the storm. Sure enough, a sniper quietly poked his head out from behind the mountainside and accurately shot down the soldier on the guard post. Brandon, following the bullet line, discovered the shadow of the enemy, immediately retaliated and took him down. The gunfire, like an order, was given. In a flash, more gunmen rushed out of the forest. The battle officially broke out in chaos. Brandon found himself locked on by an RPG and quickly rolled to the side. However, he was still thrown away by the shockwave from the explosion. His body lost control and rolled down the slope. Fortunately, he was stopped by a tree branch on the mountainside. Brandon tried to suppress the pain and loaded his gun. He found that the terrorists had broken into the guard post, captured G in the house, and were preparing to execute him. What surprised him even more was that the daring servant had decided to surrender. The enemy had taken the initiative to point out Brandon's hiding place. When he saw the terrorist raising his axe, Brandon squeezed it tightly and a bullet went through his head. Immediately after, he turned the gun barrel and shot down both the enemy and the servant. Under Brandon's accurate firepower, the remaining terrorists were like sheep waiting to be slaughtered. Wherever he shot, they fell one by one. The last one saw this and quickly took Sate hostage, intending to force Brandon to surrender. But at this time, Brandon's mentality had changed. He no longer hesitated, locked his target on the other guy, and decisively pulled the trigger to rescue Zoff at the last minute. The entire scene was monitored by the colonel through the drone camera. He smiled with satisfaction when he knew that Brandon had transformed and ordered him to return to the battlefield. However, Brandon did not return to the unit immediately, but under Zoff's direction, he went to another barracks to meet Zoff's friend. Gazette Gaz is a well-connected person who can take Brandon to see Gakub to help him answer the questions in his heart. But when the two meet, Brandon discovers that Gaz is blind. He can't help but feel anxious about the upcoming trip. But Gaz quickly shows his professionalism. He knows everything from Gakub and even gets the body of Gakub's brother-in-law. This makes Brandon look at Gaz with different eyes. Early the next morning, the two help each other enter Gakub's territory. Their actions are quickly detected by military drones and also noticed by Gakub's subordinates when the terrorists ambushing in the forest appear one after another. Brandon is immediately on high alert. Feeling Brandon's tension, Gaz calms him down and brings out the body box because according to Islam, Gakub needs his brother-in-law's body for the funeral. Brandon took this opportunity to ask them how they found out the coordinates of the sniper, but the terrorists said it was a gift from the Holy Allah. Brandon thought it was just nonsense and said straight out that they were lying. Heard that Gakub sitting in the crowd couldn't hold it in anymore. He growled, saying that he never lied. He told Brandon that because he was carrying the body of his brother-in-law, he came so that he would keep his promise to spare his life. However, Brandon's attention was not on the gas. He found out that there was a terrorist messing around with a military laptop and also found out a missile flying out of a drone. Everyone heard the warning and quickly dispersed. Brandon and the gas were thrown down the mountainside by shockwave. Luckily, neither of them were seriously injured. When they returned to the main pumping station of the pipeline, Robin was furious at this stupid act, but Brandon didn't care because he had found the cause of the problem: the Russian military. Really has no insider. The reason Jakub was able to determine the coordinates of the sniper is because they hacked into the military drone, but Robin ignored this. She did not believe that the barbaric terrorists could hack the military technology at this time. Colonel T called Brandon, and Miller angrily questioned Brandon, took this opportunity to express his speculation and let him know that there are people on the black market who are selling passwords to log into the US military system. However, the colonel still thought it was a myth and ordered Miller to manage his soldiers. Very quickly after the drone captured Jakub's position, a group of Ruya soldiers immediately set out there. Brandon and his teammates secretly provided remote support, but what everyone did not know was that this so-called intelligence was actually just a diversion launched by the terrorists. They actually hacked into the drone and got the coordinates of all the sniper as soon as the army appeared. Jakub suddenly launched a simultaneous attack because he was in the corner, so Brandon's group could not lock on the target at all, so the battle became a one-sided massacre after dealing with the Russian soldiers. Jakub was like doing a roll call aiming at a sniper who shot and injured him. He even almost hit Miller, who was lying on the top of the mountain at this time. Brandon was completely sure of his conjecture. He quickly ordered everyone to take off their tactical vests with GP locators, but Jakub's target was achieved. Seeing that there were more reinforcements, he immediately picked up the gun and ran away, waiting until Brandon and the others ran into the house. The inside was full of air. This battle made Miller completely believe what Brandon said. He told Robin that the drone was actually hacked. However, Robin still refused to believe it. Not long after, the colonel arrived at the main pumping station and gave Miller and the others a photo. In the photo with the inscription, it was obvious that Jakub had started moving to attack the gas station in South Grusa. So the colonel ordered the sniper team to quickly go there to stop him. Although Miller felt that this was not a good idea, since the military command was son, he had no choice but to lead the team members on the road. However, this time everyone was more careful and no one activated the GPS tracker on them along the way. Brandon asked who had detected Jakub's movements. When he found out that it was a drone, he became even more worried. Brandon asked Miller again, why did Jakub ignore the main pumping station that controls 900 kilometers of oil pipelines and attack an unimportant compressor pumping station? Miller was at a loss for words. He didn't understand either. Brandon took this opportunity to speak his mind. Jakub's target was never the compressor pumping station. He did it to lure us away. After hearing this, Miller was startled and scared. He decided to trust Brandon again. He quickly ordered the car to turn around. The truth was just as Brandon had predicted. The so-called attack on the compressor pumping station was actually just a diversion. Jakub's subordinates had hacked into the drone, modified the data, created fake information about his movements, and performed a cicada shedding its shell. Their real goal was to attack the abandoned main pumping station against the defenders. At this time, they saw the sniper team leave, immediately put on their masks and prepared to attack. At the same time, the colonel also began to doubt the security. The secret of the drones. He asked Robin if the terrorists could hack into the system, but Robin still firmly stated that it was impossible. However, before she could finish speaking, a shell fell, and immediately after, the terrorists launched a fierce attack. They were slapped in the face like that. Robin finally believed Brandon's words, so she hurriedly informed the command center to withdraw all the drones in the air, but doing so was like pouring salt into the sea. The main pumping station already had a weak pH system, coupled with a slow response. So very soon the main gate was broken by the terrorists. The colonel was forced to take up arms and fight, just as everyone was struggling to resist. The sniper team returned. They mounted their guns behind the battlefield and aimed at the terrorists who had nowhere to hide. Jakub saw that and knew that the opponent had arrived. So he turned around and ordered the observer to search for their location. But at this time, the drones had retreated. They no longer had any advantage. Very quickly, Brandon locked on Jakub's position, pulling the trigger accurately and shooting down the observer. Jakub was completely panicked. He raised his gun and ran towards the bushes, using his arm as a fulcrum to shoot and wound Brandon's observer. Fortunately, thanks to the previous battles, Brandon had become much calmer. He held his breath and focused on observing the bushes, finally catching the light reflected from Jakub's scope. Immediately, Brandon pulled the trigger without hesitation. The bullet flew across the battlefield, finishing Jakub off. When he was defeated, the remaining terrorists panicked and ran into the car. Finally, everything was over. Brandon, with his intelligence and marksmanship, once again resolved the deadly crisis. Miller kept praising him. He knew that Brandon did not embarrass his father. Robin also took the initiative to apologize for his previous stubbornness. However, Brandon no longer cared about these things because he had to prepare to face further dangers. Snipko Shooter is a war movie released in 2016. If I were to rate this movie on a 5-star scale, I think the action part would get 3.5 stars. This is the third installment of the Snip series. The gunfight scenes in the movie are quite satisfying, highlighting the cruelty of war and the fear of snipers, making viewers feel extremely excited about the plot. I give 2 stars. The plot of the movie is quite complete overall, but the biggest minus point is definitely the scene where Brandon goes to find Jakub to ask something even more absurd. Jakub agrees to let him go. They are really evenly matched opponents. How do you feel about this detail? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. If there is a movie you would like me to review, please leave a suggestion. I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the content, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any more interesting reviews. See you in the next videos.